On a gray morning in Dry Creek, the rain pounded hard against the chapel roof, and the church bells rang, but not for love. Inside, a young bride stood motionless, surrounded by heavy wooden pews and whispers that drifted like wind through sorrow. Then, through the storm, came another sound, the cry of a child, faint yet piercing, tearing through the rain like a plea from heaven itself. In that moment, God gave her a new light and a promise she had never made. They say fate can be cruel, but what if heartbreak is only heaven's way of guiding us toward the love we were always meant to find? Stay with this story, for before the storm fades, Dry Creek will witness a moment no one will ever forget. And if you're watching from somewhere quiet tonight, tell us where your heart is listening from. Don't forget to subscribe and walk with us through the stories that remind us that even in the fiercest storm, the light of love always finds its way home. The rain began softly that day, whispering grief against the chapel roof. The little church at the edge of Dry Creek looked tired, its white paint flaking like old memory, its rose bushes withering beneath the weight of another season. Candles flickered inside, their flames trembling with the same uncertainty that filled every heart present. Sarah Whitfield stood before the altar, hands clasped too tightly in her lace gloves. She was 24, with chestnut hair pinned into a neat bun and eyes the color of faded summer sky, eyes that still believed in happy endings. Her dress was modest, hand sewn by her own mother before she passed, a few threads uneven near the hem. But to Sarah, it was enough. It had to be. The chapel was filled with whispers that cut sharper than the wind. She's been waiting an hour now. Maybe he was delayed by the storm, but they all knew better. Reverend Cole, a frail man with kind eyes clouded by years, stood behind the pulpit, his old Bible resting heavily in his trembling hands. "My dear," he murmured, voice soft as rain, "perhaps we should—" Sarah shook her head. "He'll come," she whispered, as if saying it aloud might summon him through the storm. But outside, the only sound was thunder. The pews creaked as guests began to leave, their footsteps echoing her heartbreak. Candles melted into puddles of wax. The organ fell silent, and when the last murmur faded, Sarah was alone, a bride without a groom, a promise without a future. She stepped out into the rain. The wind caught her veil, pressing the wet lace to her face like a shroud. The world beyond the chapel was gray, blurred by tears and storms. Each step sank into the mud, the hem of her gown turning dark and heavy. Her bouquet slipped from her hand, scattering petals into the puddles. "Why, Lord?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Why me?" Then through the roar of rain came another sound, faint, fragile, impossible. A cry, not human in its strength, but painfully human in its need. Sarah froze. Her breath caught as she turned toward the church gate. Another cry, softer, pleading. She ran, clutching her skirts, the cold biting through her soaked gloves. There, beneath the old oak by the gate, sat a wicker basket soaked to its core. Inside lay a newborn, wrapped in linen embroidered with a golden crest, the emblem of the Monroe family, one of the richest and most secretive in the county. Sarah dropped to her knees. Oh, sweet heaven! The baby's lips quivered, his tiny fingers curling toward her touch. Instinct silenced her despair. She lifted the child against her chest, feeling his heartbeat. Weak, but steady. It was as if the storm itself paused to watch. She burst back into the chapel, rain streaming down her face, clutching the infant as if he were the last warm thing on earth. "Reverend," she called. Someone left him, outside, in this storm. Cole blinked, pushing his spectacles higher. Good Lord! He took the baby gently, his hand surprisingly steady. When his fingers brushed the embroidered linen, his expression darkened. This crest. Monroe. I haven't seen it in years. "Who are they?" Sarah asked, her voice small. He sighed. "Old money. The Monroes built half this town and buried the rest. Their patriarch, Silas Monroe, is a man both feared and respected. Some say he's hidden more sins in Red Hollow than prayers in this church." Thunder shook the windows, rattling the old glass. Sarah looked at the baby, then at the Reverend. Then maybe he'll be buried one more tonight. They stood in silence, the only sound the rain and the fragile cry of new life. The church felt different now, no longer sacred, but sheltering. Reverend Cole's eyes softened. "You've been left with a heavy choice, child. Don't let the cruelty of others take your heart too." Sarah brushed her thumb across the baby's cheek. "He's so small, I don't even know his name." "Then give him one," Cole said. "God's gifts often come unnamed." She looked down, smiled faintly through tears. "Then I'll call him Gabriel." Outside, lightning split the clouds, and for an instant, it illuminated them both, the broken bride and the newborn standing together in the house of God. Hours later, the storm eased, but the air remained heavy with sorrow. Reverend Cole fetched blankets while Sarah sat in the back pew, rocking the baby gently. Her soaked dress clung to her skin, her veil tangled around her shoulders. The candles burned low, their golden glow wrapping her in a fragile peace. She whispered to the sleeping child, "I thought I was waiting for love. Maybe I was waiting for you." The baby stirred, opening his eyes for a brief, breathtaking moment. Blue-gray, soft and familiar, the same hue as hers. The connection startled her. Two abandoned souls finding each other in the ruin of one night. Outside the chapel, something moved. A man in a dark coat stood beneath the eaves, rain cascading off his hat brim. He held a torn piece of paper, the edges smudged and curling, his gaze fixed on the door, on the faint light within. When the baby cried again, he stiffened. Slowly, he tucked the paper back into his pocket and stepped into the darkness. Across the yard, Scout, the old German shepherd belonging to Martha Keats, the widow who lived next door, lifted his head from under the porch and let out a low growl. He sensed danger the way old creatures do, but the rain drowned his warning. Inside, Sarah was lost in her own storm of thoughts. She rocked Gabriel and hummed softly, a melody her mother once sang long ago. When Reverend Cole returned, he found her by the door, eyes on the horizon. "I can't stay here," she said quietly. He hesitated. "The night is cruel, Sarah. Where will you go?" She looked down at the child in her arms. "Wherever he needs me to." The Reverend's eyes glistened with both pride and sorrow. "Then may God go with you, my dear." Sarah nodded. She drew the shawl tighter around the baby and stepped out into the night once more. Behind her, the church bell tolled once, soft, hollow, mournful. The vow was broken, but something holier had begun. As Sarah disappeared into the rain, a gust of wind caught a scrap of paper near the church gate, the one the stranger had dropped. It landed face up in the puddle, the words still legible under a flash of lightning. "Red Hollow, where all debts are buried." Dawn came slow to Dry Creek, spilling pale light over a world still wet from the night storm. The muddy road glistened like an old scar, and the fields breathed steam under the faint warmth of morning. Sarah trudged along the path that led beyond the last row of cabins, her boots caked in mud, her dress wrinkled and heavy. The baby in her arms slept beneath a frayed wool blanket Reverend Cole had pressed into her hands before dawn. He had begged her to stay until morning service, but she couldn't. Something in her heart, a trembling urgency, pushed her forward. By mid-morning, she reached a small wooden house crouched beneath a cluster of poplars. The boards were gray, worn smooth by wind and years. A narrow chimney puffed a thin wisp of smoke. Sarah hesitated at the gate. A woman appeared on the porch, tall, with a wiry frame and sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her face was striking, sun-darkened skin, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of riverstone. 40, perhaps a little older, carrying the hard grace of someone who had known both labor and loss. "You're Reverend Cole's runaway bride," she said, her tone neither cruel nor kind. "He told me you might pass this way." Sarah blinked. "You must be Mrs. Keats." "Martha," the woman corrected. "Just Martha now. Come in before that child catches a cold." Inside, the cabin smelled of pine soap and faint smoke. The walls were lined with shelves of jars and dried herbs, everything tidy, purposeful. A fire glowed in the hearth, and beside it lay a large German shepherd, fur black and tan, one ear slightly bent. The dog lifted his head, studying Sarah with calm suspicion. "Don't mind Scout," Martha said. "He growls before he trusts, but he's never bitten anyone who didn't deserve it." Sarah managed a small smile, clutching the child closer. "I'll try to stay on his good side." "You'll do fine." Martha motioned toward a chair near the fire. "Sit. Let me see that baby." Sarah obeyed. She loosened the blanket, revealing Gabriel's tiny face. The infant stirred, blinking up at the light. Martha leaned closer, her rough hand surprisingly gentle. "He's a strong one. How old?" "Maybe a week. I don't know." Martha's eyes flickered. "Found him, did you?" Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. Outside the church, in the rain. The older woman studied her for a long moment. God chooses strange messengers. The days that followed were quiet, but heavy with unspoken things. Sarah learned to light the old stove, to rock Gabriel in the creaky chair that had once been Martha's. Reverend Cole stopped by every other day with bread or milk, offering scripture and silent comfort. The town still whispered, the runaway bride, the child in the storm. But Dry Creek had learned to keep its gossip behind closed curtains. Martha spoke little. Her life was built on tasks, chopping wood, tending hens, mending what could be mended. Yet sometimes, when she thought Sarah wasn't looking, her gaze lingered on the baby with something between ache and reverence. One afternoon, as wind rattled the windows, Martha finally asked, "Do you know whose child he is?" Sarah froze mid-stitch. "No, but—" "Reverend Cole thinks the Monroes might be involved." Martha's expression hardened. "The Monroes? Of course." She set down her mug with a thud. "That family poisons everything they touch." Sarah frowned. "You know them?" "I used to work in their kitchen years back," Martha said. "Silas Monroe's money built this town, but his pride nearly tore it apart. And his son." She stopped, jaw tightening. "Let's just say trouble runs in their blood." A gust of wind howled through the cracks, making Scout lift his head and growl softly. Martha lowered her voice. "If that baby bears their mark, you'd best be careful. Men like Silas don't lose things. They hide them." Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine. "I don't want trouble. I only want him safe." Martha nodded. "Then keep quiet. Dry Creek listens when it shouldn't." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The cabin creaked with the shifting wind. She lay awake beside the cradle, the dim light of the hearth painting amber lines across the floor. Gabriel stirred, and she rose to tuck the blanket around him. Something caught her eye. The wicker basket by the wall, the one she had carried from the church. It was still damp along the edges, the linen inside folded neatly. She hesitated, then reached in. Her fingers brushed something stiff. Paper. A torn envelope, edges ragged. She unfolded it carefully. Half the writing was gone, ink smeared, but one phrase remained visible in bold, uneven letters. "Red Hollow." Her breath hitched. She turned the paper over, searching for more, but the rest was ruined by water. "Red Hollow," she whispered. She had heard that name before. Reverend Cole's warning from that night. The valley where Silas Monroe was said to have buried his sins. The floorboard creaked behind her. Scout rose from the hearth, ears pricked, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. The dog padded to the door, nose twitching. Outside, something shifted. Faint footsteps crunching gravel. Then silence. Sarah blew out the lamp, her pulse thudding in her throat. She stood motionless, the baby's cradle behind her, the dog poised like a shadow. Another step, closer this time. She held her breath. Then, from beyond the thin wall, a shape moved across the window, just a flicker of darker darkness. Scout barked once, sharp and warning. "Who's there?" she cried. No answer, only wind. Martha burst in from the adjoining room, hair loose, holding a lantern. "What happened?" "I saw someone. Outside." Martha shoved the door open, light slicing through the dark. The yard lay empty. Nothing but grass glistening under the moon. The trees whispered softly as if mocking their fear. Scout darted out, sniffing the air, then returned to sit at Martha's feet, growling low. Martha frowned. "Someone's watching this place. I can feel it." Sarah clutched the baby tighter. "Why us?" The older woman's eyes moved to the basket. "Maybe because of him." The next morning it dawned pale and cold. They found footprints by the well, boot prints, heavy and fresh. Martha knelt to study them, her brow furrowing. "Not from town. These heels are worn crooked, like a man who rides more than he walks." "Silas's men," Sarah whispered. "Could be." Martha rose, brushing her hands. Red Hollow's only a day's ride from here. If that's where the letter points, we may have stirred a nest best left buried. Reverend Cole arrived that afternoon, his horse lathered with sweat. "You must both stay indoors," he warned, eyes grave. Silas Monroe's been asking questions about a lost child. Sarah's heart sank. "He knows." "Not yet," Cole said, lowering his voice. "But he will. God help you, child. You've been drawn into something far older than your sorrow." Martha stood beside him, arms crossed. "Then we'll be ready." The Reverend nodded, but his face betrayed little hope. As the sun sank behind the ridge, the cabin fell silent again. Sarah sat by the window, watching clouds turn to fire in the distance. She traced the word Red Hollow across the torn paper with her finger, feeling the weight of it. Gabriel slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the hills. Scout dozed by the door, tail twitching, and outside, half hidden behind the line of trees, a dark figure watched the chimney smoke curl into the evening sky. The night pressed against the cabin like a living thing. Wind crawled through the cracks in the wooden walls, whispering the kind of secrets only fear could understand. Sarah sat by the cradle, watching the fire die into embers. Each faint hiss of wood felt like a heartbeat, counting down to something unseen. Outside, the forest breathed. Every rustle of leaves, every distant creak of the branch sent her eyes darting toward the window. She couldn't shake the image of that dark figure from the night before. Martha moved quietly in the adjoining room, packing dried herbs into a tin box. "The wind's restless tonight," she said without turning. "Scout's been pacing since sundown." Sarah looked toward the door. The dog lay near it now, head up, ears stiff. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Martha's voice softened. "Storm's past, yet he still smells something." The lantern flame wavered. Sarah rose and drew the curtain closed, her fingers trembling. "Maybe it's nothing." "Nothing doesn't make a dog growl," Martha muttered. Scout suddenly stood, muscles tensed, tail rigid. Then came the sound, a faint scrape outside, deliberate, too heavy for wind. Sarah froze. Martha's hand went to the poker by the hearth. "Stay with the child," she whispered, but Sarah couldn't. Something deep inside her, part terror, part defiance, made her follow to the door. The floor groaned beneath her feet. Martha flung the door open, the lantern raised high. "Who's out there?" For a breathless moment, the yard seemed empty, just silver grass trembling under the moon. Then, from behind the well, a shadow broke loose and ran. "Scout!" Martha shouted. The dog lunged forward, a streak of muscle and fury. The night erupted with snarls and the sound of fabric tearing. "Hold the light steady." Martha ran after them, boots sinking into mud. Sarah stayed at the threshold, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The lantern's glow stretched across the field, catching flashes of movement. Scout leaping, the stranger stumbling, the glint of something metallic. Then a cry, sharp, human. The figure fell. Scout stood over him, teeth bared. "Easy, boy," Martha called, breathless, approaching cautiously. She knelt, pulling back the man's hood. Sarah stepped closer, clutching the lantern. The man's face was streaked with dirt and fear. He was young, no older than 30, with coarse black hair and a jagged scar cutting across his jaw. A small bronze emblem gleamed on his collar, half hidden by torn fabric. Martha snatched it up before he could react. "I know this mark." The man struggled, eyes wild. "Don't." But she already saw it. A horseshoe surrounded by thorns. The Monroe crest. Sarah's stomach twisted. "You work for Silas Monroe." The man spat to the side, voice hoarse. "You shouldn't have what's his." Martha's grip tightened around the poker. "Hi, you mean the child?" The stranger sneered. "That baby belongs to the Monroes. Hand it over, and maybe he'll forget you exist." Sarah felt her knees weaken. Why would he? She stopped herself. The thought was too monstrous to speak. Martha stepped forward. "You tell your master to fetch his own lies. This child won't leave here tonight." The man's gaze flicked to Sarah, then the door behind her. "He'll come himself then. And when he does, no prayer will save you." Scout growled low, and the man flinched. "Go," Martha ordered. "Before I let him finish what he started." He scrambled to his feet and disappeared into the trees, leaving behind the torn scrap of his cloak and the smell of sweat and fear. Inside, the silence felt heavier than before. Sarah sank into the chair, trembling. He knew about the baby, about me. Martha locked the door, sliding the bolt with a metallic click. Then we know what we're up against. Sarah's voice quivered. Martha, what if Silas comes here? He already has, in spirit. The older woman dropped the emblem onto the table. That's his seal. He's marked us now. The firelight flickered over Sarah's face, pale and drawn. Why would a man like that want an abandoned child? Martha hesitated. Maybe the boy isn't abandoned. Maybe he's proof of something someone wanted buried. Later that night, when Martha finally slept, Sarah couldn't. She sat by the cradle, tracing the pattern on the baby's blanket. The embroidered flowers shimmered faintly in the lamplight, white lilies stitched in perfect symmetry. Her breath caught. She had seen that pattern before. Her mind flashed back to the day of her wedding, the lace veil folded carefully over the pew, the same white lilies embroidered along its edge. Her groom had worn a matching scarf tucked beneath his collar, its border stitched by the Monroe tailor. Her fingers trembled. Could it be the same thread, the same hand, the same house? She lifted the blanket closer to the firelight, the silk shining faintly through the linen. It wasn't just a coincidence. The baby stirred, a soft whimper escaping his lips. Sarah whispered, "Who are you, little one? What secret do you carry?" Scout shifted beside the door, restless again. The wind outside rose, slapping against the shutters. Somewhere beyond the trees, a horse neighed, a single haunting note that froze her blood. She hurried to the window. The moon revealed movement along the ridge. Several riders, their torches flickering like angry stars. "Martha!" The widow was awake instantly, already reaching for her coat. "How many?" "3. Maybe 4. Martha swore under her breath. "We can't outrun them with a child. We'll have to hide." Scout barked, tail low, as if agreeing. They moved quickly. Martha pulled back a loose floorboard behind the stove, revealing a shallow crawl space lined with hay and blankets. "Get in. Keep the baby quiet." Sarah hesitated. "And you." "I'll stay where I always am, between danger and what I've got left to lose." Sarah's eyes stung. "You don't owe me this." Martha gave a dry laugh. "Maybe not. But once, I lost a child because I was too afraid to open my door. I won't make the same mistake twice." They waited in the dark. Boots struck the porch. A fist pounded the door. "Open up," a voice barked. "By order of Silas Monroe." Martha stood firm, poker in hand. "You're trespassing." Another blow splintered the frame. Scout lunged, teeth flashing, his growls shaking the small cabin. Through the crack beneath the stove, Sarah saw shadows move. 3 men, rifles slung across their backs. The door burst open, lantern light flooding the room. The man they had chased earlier stepped forward, a bandage around his arm. "She has the child. The boss wants it alive." Martha raised the poker. "You'll find no child here," he laughed. "We'll see." They spread out, overturning furniture, kicking open cabinets. Scout lunged at one of them, teeth sinking into fabric and flesh. The man howled, striking the dog hard. Sarah bit her lip to keep from crying out. The leader reached for the cradle. Empty. He turned, eyes narrowing. "Where is it?" "Gone," Martha said evenly. "Just like your conscience." He struck her across the face. She fell to her knees, blood at her lip. That was when Scout attacked again. Full force. The room erupted in chaos. Shouts, snarls, the crash of a chair. One of the lanterns toppled, oil splattering, flame catching on the rug. "Fire!" someone yelled. Sarah clutched Gabriel tighter under the floor, tears streaking down her face as smoke began to seep through the cracks. Then, through the rising haze, she saw it. The emblem of Monroe glinting at the man's belt, catching firelight like an omen. Her heart turned cold. She knew that emblem. It was the same crest sewn onto her groom's handkerchief the day he promised to return. When the chaos above faded, the sound of hoofbeats thundered away into the night. The smell of smoke hung heavy, but the fire had died out. Sarah crawled from the hiding place. Gabriel clutched to her chest. Martha sat slumped against the wall, bruised but alive. Scout lay beside her, panting, tail weakly thumping against the floor. "They're gone," Martha whispered. Sarah knelt, voice shaking. "Martha, I saw the mark. The same one my husband wore. He was one of them." The older woman's eyes widened, then softened with pity. "Child, then you've been lied to deeper than you know." Sarah stared into the dying embers, the truth dawning like a slow sunrise of pain. She rose, holding the baby close. "If Silas wants him, he'll have to come for us himself." Outside, the forest stirred again, the night whispering its endless warning. Dawn came late that morning. The horizon was a bruise of faded pink behind the clouds, and the world lay silent after the storm. Sarah stood outside the charred cabin, Gabriel cradled to her chest. The cold cut through her shawl, the air sharp with smoke and memory. Martha limped slightly as she packed what little remained: 2 canteens, a loaf of bread, a folded blanket. Scout circled them, tail low, his fur still streaked with ash. Reverend Cole rode up on a bay horse, his white beard damp with mist. "Red Hollow's 30 miles east," he said, voice steady but tired. "If truth lives anywhere, it's there." Sarah glanced toward the ridge, fog drifting like pale ghosts. "And if they're waiting?" Cole's eyes, old but fierce, met hers. "Then we reach the truth before they reach us." "Let's ride," Martha said. The plain stretched wide beneath a bruised sky. Wind ran its cold fingers through the grass, whispering warnings. They rode in silence for hours. Sarah held the reins tight, her arms aching. Gabriel slept against her shoulder, warm against the chill. Cole rode beside her. "You've heard tales of Silas Monroe," he began, his tone low. "But legends lie. I've seen what hides beneath." Sarah looked over. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Years ago, he had a woman working his ranch. Rumor said she bore him a child out of wedlock. Both vanished. Folks said Silas made it right, in the way powerful men do." Martha turned her head sharply. "You're saying this baby—" "I'm saying some debts don't die," Cole said. "They just learn to hide." The words chilled Sarah more than the wind. Could Gabriel be that child? A secret buried, and now unearthed. By noon, fog swallowed the trail. Birch trunks shimmered white against the gloom. Scout barked once, low and certain. Martha pulled her reins. "We're being followed." Cole turned. Through the haze, dark riders closed the distance. "Go!" Martha shouted. The horses surged forward, hooves pounding mud. Branches clawed at their clothes. Rain needled their faces. The forest blurred into streaks of gray and green. "They're gaining!" Sarah cried. "Left!" Cole roared. "Toward the creek!" The thunder of pursuit grew louder. A bullet whined past, snapping a branch. "Faster!" Martha urged. Scout darted ahead, barking, leading them down the slope. Water gleamed below, a narrow current cutting through stone. They plunged in, icy spray stinging their skin. "Across!" Cole yelled. But the riders followed, relentless, black coats fanning like wings. The storm broke open above them. Rain poured, washing blood and dirt from their hands. Gabriel began to cry, his voice lost in the roar of hooves. "Almost there!" Martha pointed ahead. The ridge. Lightning tore the sky. For an instant Sarah saw it. A hollow carved deep in the earth, red clay glowing like a wound. Her horse stumbled, nearly throwing her. One pursuer lifted his rifle. "Down!" Cole shouted. She ducked. The shot grazed her hair. Scout lunged, slamming into the gunman's horse. The animal reared. The man toppled into the mud. "Scout!" Sarah cried. The dog turned, bleeding from his shoulder, but still growling. Another whip lashed out, catching him across the flank. Scout staggered, but didn't retreat. Cole fired into the air. "Enough!" The riders pulled back into the fog, regrouping. "They'll be back," Martha said. "Then we keep moving," Sarah whispered. By dusk, they reached Red Hollow. The rain faded to mist. The valley lay still. No birds, no wind, only the slow drip of water from the cliffs. They stopped near an old barn, half collapsed, its roof sagging with time. The red soil beneath their boots looked almost like dried blood. Cole lit a lantern, the glow flickering over warped beams. "This was Monroe land once," he said quietly. "Some say this is where the woman disappeared." Sarah felt the air thicken, heavy with something unspoken. "Why bring us here?" Cole's eyes softened. "Because sometimes ghosts guard the truth." They settled inside. Scout limped in, his fur wet and dark. Sarah cleaned the wound gently, whispering, "You saved him." The dog pressed his muzzle to her palm. Martha crouched near the cradle. If Silas truly abandoned a child once, he'll do worse to bury that shame now. Sarah nodded, eyes on the sleeping baby. Then we don't let him. Night deepened. A twig snapped outside. Another. Cole straightened, hand on his revolver. Scout growled low, teeth bared. Through the crack in the wall, Sarah saw lanterns swaying in the fog. "They've found us," Cole said. Martha blew out the light. "Stay behind me." Voices barked orders outside. The barn door shuddered, then burst open. Silas Monroe stepped through. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face weathered but proud. Silver hair slicked back, black coat untouched by mud. A gold ring caught the light, a horseshoe encircled by thorns. Behind him stood 2 armed riders. Silas's gaze swept the room, stopping on Sarah. "You've gone to great trouble, Mrs. Whitfield." She didn't answer. "You have something that belongs to me," he said. Martha raised a poker. "The only thing you own here is your sin." Silas's mouth curved slightly. "Ah, the widow with fire in her tongue." He looked at the child, voice lowering. "That boy carries my blood." Sarah's breath caught. "You're lying." "I don't lie about my family," he said. "My son, the man you were to marry, was his father." The world tilted. The sound of rain filled the silence. Gabriel whimpered softly. Cole's voice trembled with fury. "You mean the heir you cast out once already? The child you tried to bury?" Silas's stare cut through him. "Watch your mouth, preacher." Sarah stepped forward, trembling, but firm. "A name isn't worth a soul." His expression darkened. "You don't know what you're defying." "Then teach me," she said. "But you'll have to kill me first." The room held its breath. Scout growled again, low and steady. Silas extended his hand. "Give me the child, and you walk away alive." Sarah looked down at Gabriel, then at the man before her. Rain began to tap against the tin roof like soft drums. "No." Silas's smile vanished. "Then may God help you." He turned to his men. "Burn it." The torch hissed to life, flame blooming in the dark. The flames devoured the barn like hungry mouths. Sparks leapt into the night, painting the rain in gold and red. Sarah shielded Gabriel with her coat as smoke clawed at her throat. Martha shouted something through the roar, but the wind stole the words. Reverend Cole's voice broke through the chaos. "This way." They fled through the back wall, where the boards had half rotted. Smoke billowed behind them as the barn collapsed in on itself with a cry like thunder. Scout barked, limping but determined, guiding them down the slope toward the creek. When Sarah turned back, she saw Silas silhouetted against the fire, tall, unmoving, his face lit in gold and ash. For one terrible heartbeat, their eyes met through the storm. His gaze held neither rage nor mercy, only ownership. By dawn, the fire was only a memory. The Monroe estate loomed in the distance, its white columns rising from the mist like pillars of judgment. Guards patrolled the fence line, rifles slung, boots sinking into wet soil. They had been captured before sunrise. Now Sarah sat inside a carriage that smelled of leather and fear. Her wrists were bound loosely. The child slept in her arms. Martha, bruised but unbroken, sat beside her. Across from them, Reverend Cole stared out of the window, silent as prayer. The road curved upward through rows of sycamores until the house appeared, massive, cold, and perfect. Silas waited on the front steps. He was immaculate again, as if the night had burned only for her, not him. His gloved hand rested on the silver head of a cane, though his stance betrayed no weakness. "Bring them in," he ordered. The guards obeyed, boots echoing across the marble floor. The house was suffocatingly quiet. Paintings of horses lined the hall, each rendered with impossible precision, their eyes alive with fear. Sarah could almost feel the weight of their gaze on her back. Silas dismissed the guards with a nod. When the door shut, he turned, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Whitfield," he began softly, "you've caused quite a storm." Sarah stood straighter, though her knees trembled. "You lit it, Mr. Monroe." A faint smile touched his lips. "True, but you carried it farther than I ever could." He led them into a grand room where morning light filtered through tall windows, falling across the polished floor like broken glass. On the mantel stood a silver frame. Inside it, a photograph of a young man. Sarah's breath caught. The face was achingly familiar, the same dark hair, the same quiet eyes. Her groom. Silas noticed her gaze. "My son, Jonathan Monroe." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He's alive?" Silas didn't answer. Instead, he poured himself a glass of brandy and sat. "He was supposed to marry you, to restore what was broken." "What was broken?" "My family name," Silas said simply. "Jonathan made mistakes. You were the correction." Sarah's fingers tightened around Gabriel. "You mean I was the cover." He swirled the amber liquid, eyes distant. "There was a woman before you. She worked here. Quiet, loyal, too loyal. She gave him that child." His gaze flicked toward the baby. "I offered her safety. She refused, so I took the only safety left to her, from her." Sarah's stomach twisted. "You took her child." Silas nodded once. "A child is easier to silence than a scandal." Martha gasped. "You heartless." Silas raised a hand. "You think I'm cruel. The world is crueler. I've seen what ruin does to a name. You'd let a bastard inherit everything?" Cole stepped forward, voice hard. "That bastard has more innocence than you have faith." Silas's jaw tightened. "Enough preaching, Reverend. You of all men should understand sacrifice." The room fell silent, but for the ticking of a clock. Sarah stared at the photograph again. Jonathan's eyes seemed to follow her, gentle, distant, unreachable. The man she once loved had vanished long before this day. "Where is he?" she asked quietly. Silas's voice softened, almost wistful. "Gone. He ran from the life I gave him, left behind everything, his duty, his child, even you." The words landed like a stone in her chest. "He ran from me." Silas poured another drink. "He ran from shame. You were simply standing in its path." For a long time, Sarah said nothing. The fire in the grate hissed softly. Rain tapped the windows in a rhythm too slow to comfort. Then she lifted her head. "And yet you call this child yours." Silas's eyes narrowed. "He is my blood, my son's son." "He's no one's shame," she said. "He's a chance to do what you never did. Love without fear." Silas's hand tightened around his glass. "Love does not erase lineage. It redeems it," she replied. He rose, towering above her. "You will give him back." "No." "Then I'll take him." The door burst open. One of the guards stepped in, breathless. "Sir, people in town saw the fire. Sheriff's on his way." Silas's composure cracked for the first time. "Get them off my land before he arrives." The guard hesitated. "What about the witnesses?" Silas's voice dropped to a whisper. "Bury them in the same silence that keeps this family alive." He turned to Sarah. "You've done enough harm. You'll leave this house, but not with him." He reached for Gabriel. Sarah stepped back, clutching the baby close. "Don't you dare." Silas's tone hardened. "You can't protect him forever." "I can try," she said. "Try, and die with him." Martha moved between them, trembling but fierce. "You'll have to kill me first." Silas's gaze flicked toward her, almost pitying. "You think that's a threat to a man who's buried worse?" The Reverend stepped forward, voice steady. "Silas Monroe, you forget one thing. Truth has a habit of surviving fire." Silas turned on him. "Truth bends. Money doesn't burn." Sarah looked toward the window. Beyond the rain, she saw the faint glimmer of a lantern, someone approaching on horseback. Sheriff, maybe. Or fate itself. She took a breath and whispered, "Then you'd better act fast." Silas lunged. His hand caught the edge of the blanket. Gabriel cried out, startled. Sarah struggled, nails scraping against his gloved wrist. "Let him go." For a moment, neither yielded. His strength met her desperation, a terrible balance. Then he tore the child from her arms. Sarah screamed, stumbling forward. "No!" Martha caught her before she fell. "Sarah." Silas turned toward the door, the baby wailing in his arms. "He'll be raised in silence, far from your pity. Better forgotten than cursed." Cole shouted, "You can't bury God's will, Silas." The older man didn't look back. "I've buried worse." He strode into the rain, guards closing around him. Sarah tore free of Martha's grip and ran after him, bare feet slapping the marble floor. Outside, the wind howled through the sycamores. Silas mounted his horse, clutching the child to his chest. "Silas," she cried, "he's not yours to save or destroy." The rain swallowed her words. Silas spurred the horse forward. Mud flew. Hooves struck sparks against the stones. Sarah stumbled into the yard, soaked and trembling, staring after the vanishing silhouette. The Reverend reached her side, breath ragged. "We'll find him," he said. "We'll find him before it's too late." Sarah's face lifted to the storm. "He said the same once," she whispered, her voice breaking. And he lied. The storm had quieted, but the night still trembled. Somewhere beyond the line of red oaks, the sound of hooves faded into the wind. Silas Monroe rode like a man chased by his own sins. The child clutched in his arms, his lantern swinging wildly, spilling streaks of gold across the mud-soaked ground. Behind him, Sarah ran. Her dress was torn, her hair unbound, the wet fabric dragging like a second skin. Every breath felt like swallowing knives. "Don't let him take the child," she gasped, her voice half to herself, half to the heavens. Scout darted ahead, muscles straining, fur glistening in the pale moonlight. Martha followed close behind on horseback, her face carved by determination and fear. "Keep going, Sarah, don't stop." They reached the open field where the storm had left a trail of broken branches and glimmering puddles. Silas's silhouette flickered at the far end of the meadow, tall, commanding, almost spectral. The child's faint cry pierced the distance. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to shatter what little strength remained in Sarah's heart. She stumbled once, fell to her knees. Mud clung to her hands, cold and thick. Then she looked up and saw Reverend Cole's lantern bobbing through the darkness. The old man's face was pale beneath his wide-brimmed hat, his silver beard soaked. His voice was steady, though trembling with age. "The truth won't save him, Sarah, but it might save you." "What truth?" she demanded, pushing herself upright. Cole hesitated, eyes glinting in the lantern light. "Silas once confessed to me, years ago. There was a woman, a servant on his estate. He cast her out when she bore his grandchild, said she brought shame to his family. That child was left to die near Red Hollow." Sarah froze. The world seemed to stop breathing with her. "Then this child," she began, her voice breaking. "Yes," Cole said softly, "this isn't just his grandson. This is the life he tried to erase once before." The wind shifted, and in that breath of silence, something within Sarah hardened. She rose, trembling but resolute. "Then tonight," she whispered, "we take back what he abandoned." They reached the edge of Red Hollow, a basin of mist and shadow, where the land dipped into old marsh and whispering pines. The air smelled of wet bark and iron. Fireflies blinked faintly between branches, as if the world itself held its breath. Up ahead, Silas had dismounted near the riverbank. His coat flared in the wind, his gray hair wild, his eyes fever-bright in the lamplight. The child lay on a blanket beside him, still crying. Silas knelt, his hands shaking, not with mercy, but with indecision. He turned as Sarah approached. "You shouldn't have followed," he said, voice low, hoarse. "You don't understand what this means." "I understand enough," Sarah said. "You're trying to bury your guilt with the same hands that caused it." He straightened, the old power returning to his stance. "That boy carries my family's blood, and that blood is both a blessing and curse. I will not see him raised in shame." "Then you've learned nothing," Martha said, stepping out from behind a tree, rain dripping from her hat. "Because shame isn't in the child. It's in the men who make women pay for their pride." Silas's jaw clenched. "You've no right to speak of my family." "Family?" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "A family built on lies and silence. That isn't family. It's a graveyard with your name on every stone." Scout barked sharply, circling the baby. The German shepherd's hackles rose, his stance firm, a living barrier between innocence and the storm of guilt before him. Silas stepped forward, anger flaring. "Move, beast!" Scout didn't. The dog's growl was low, primal. It wasn't violence. It was judgment. Reverend Cole raised his lantern high. "Enough!" His voice, usually gentle, now thundered like distant bells. "Silas Monroe, in the eyes of God and every soul in Dry Creek, your sin is laid bare. You cast out the mother of your bloodline, and now you would do the same to her child? You cannot buy silence twice." For the first time, Silas's composure cracked. His gaze faltered, not at Cole, not at Martha, but at Sarah, standing there in the half-light, soaked, trembling, her arms outstretched toward the crying child. "What would you do?" he asked her, his voice breaking. "What would you have me do?" Sarah stepped closer. You can't undo what's been done, but you can stop repeating it. Let the child live. Let me raise him. I'll carry the burden you refused. He stared at her, this young woman who'd lost everything and still stood with fire in her eyes. The lantern flame flickered between them, gold against gray. For a brief, fragile second, Silas looked almost human. Then pride returned, cold and sharp. No, he muttered. You'll ruin him. He lunged forward, snatching the child. Scout barked and sprang. Chaos exploded. The lantern fell, scattering sparks through wet leaves. Martha screamed. Cole stumbled forward, clutching his chest. Sarah dove into the fray. The baby wailed. The world narrowed to that sound. Silas tripped over a root, his boot sliding in mud. The child slipped from his grasp. Sarah caught him, barely, her fingers closing around the blanket as she fell. The impact stole her breath, but the baby was safe in her arms. Silas, Martha shouted, stop this before it's too late. But he didn't. Silas staggered upright, rage and humiliation twisting his face. He pointed at Sarah, voice trembling with something between fury and despair. You'll regret this, girl. You'll regret standing against me. Behind them, lights appeared in the fog. Villagers from Dry Creek following the commotion. Reverend Cole raised his arm, shouting to them, bear witness to the truth. The crowd closed in, their whispers cutting through the night like rustling leaves. Silas froze, surrounded by the very people who once feared him. Cole's voice steadied. She saved what you cast away. She's the mother this child deserves. Silas looked around, the faces, the judgment, the years of reputation crumbling like rotted timber. Then, silently, he turned. Without another word, he mounted his horse and rode into the mist. No one followed. The next morning dawned pale and gentle. Mist rolled off the hills of Red Hollow like breath exhaled after a long grief. The air smelled of wet pine and new beginnings. Sarah sat on the porch of Martha's cabin, the baby wrapped in a wool blanket across her chest. His tiny fingers curled around the edge of her sleeve. Each rise and fall of his breath steadied her own. Martha sat nearby, mending a tear in her coat. He's got your stubborn eyes, she said softly. Sarah smiled faintly. Maybe he'll need them. Reverend Cole stood by the gate, the first light catching his worn face. You've done what many couldn't, he said. You turned pain into mercy. Sarah looked down at the baby. I didn't save him, she whispered. He saved me. Scout lifted his head from the porch boards, tail thumping once. The sound was soft, sure, like a heartbeat the house could feel. Above them, the clouds parted. Sunlight poured over the valley, gilding every blade of grass, every trembling leaf. The river glimmered like glass. It was as if the earth itself forgave them all. Sarah stepped off the porch, holding the baby toward the light. Welcome home, she murmured. Martha rose beside her. Reverend Cole bowed his head. Scout barked once, bright, joyful, final. And for the first time since that gray morning in Dry Creek, the church bells rang again, not for loss, but for life. Sometimes life takes everything from us, our love, our pride, even the future we thought we had. But in the silence that follows heartbreak, something unexpected can still be born. Sarah's story reminds us that family isn't written in blood, it's written in compassion. That forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it can heal the heart that carries it. And when we choose kindness, even after the world has turned cold, we become the light someone else was praying for in the dark. If this story found a quiet place in your heart, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from, and maybe share the kind of love that once changed your life. We would be honored to hear your story, because stories like yours keep the world gentle. Subscribe and stay a little longer with us, here among those who still believe in small miracles. For every tale we tell is a reminder that even after loss, love still finds its way home.